Pozdravljeni in dobrodošli na dogodku Odprta znanost 2020, ki ga organizira Društvo Mlada akademija skupaj v sodelovanju z Mlado sekcijo Statističnega društva Slovenije. Nadaljevala bom v angleščini, saj imamo gosta iz tujine. Hello and welcome to our Open Science 2020 event organized by the Young Academy of Slovenia and young sections of the Slovenian Statistical Society. Open Science 2020 is part of the month of science organized by the Ministry of Education, Science and Sports in Slovenia. My name is Arja Muršič and I'm a member of Young Academy. This week is annual Open Access Week, as I'm sure you know, and we celebrate it with a series of 4 events. Yesterday we talked about Plan S, and in the next 2 days you can join us to discuss European Open Science Cloud, and last but not least, on Thursday, we are holding a roundtable discussion about research assessment. And as I'm also sure many of you know, today is also World Statistics Day, and we are honoring it with a lecture and discussion on the reproducibility of research. Together with me here today are Assistant Professor Katja Lozar-Manfreda from Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Ljubljana, and our guest, Professor Michael Bošnjak.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to introduce our guest. Professor Michael Bošnjak is the director of the Leibniz Institute for Psychology Information, which is a scientific research support organization for psychology, but also broader. And as an infrastructure program and institute, it supports the entire scientific work process, including the documenting of research and archiving data, which are the basis for reproducibility, today's topic. I've known Michael for more than 20 years. We started to cooperate as PhD students and were the first methodologists to have the PhD in web survey methodology at the beginning of this century. In all these years, his research and professional interest expanded beyond the web survey methodology, also to the field of consumer and business psychology. And lately, much of his research interest focuses on research synthesis methods, and he has several publications on this topic, especially in the last years. So before joining the Leibniz Institute for Psychology Information in Trier in 2017, he had many other positions. He was a team leader for the area survey operations at GISIS. Within GISIS, he also was the founding team leader of the GISIS panel, a probabilistic mixed mode omnibus panel. At the same time, he was a full professor at the University of Mannheim. Before that, he was also a professor at the Free University of Bolzano in Italy, and at the University of Mannheim. He worked at Zuma at the beginning of his career when we met. In all these years, he has been regularly cooperating with the University of Ljubljana as regards research with the Center for Methodology and Informatics and Center for Social Informatics at the Faculty of Social Sciences, but also at the educational premises, as he has been a guest professor at the interdisciplinary doctoral program of statistics already for several years. He also mentored 2 of our PhD students. He regularly serves as the member of the committees for doctoral studies. So I'm really looking forward to hear what you have to say, Michael, today. But before I give you the virtual floor, let me just tell to the audience that if you want to ask questions, you can do so by using the portal, I will say in Slovenian, sli.do or sli.do, and the code is 22923. So you can enter the questions there and also vote for questions entered by others. And we will get these questions, Michael, then by chat. Okay, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katja. Thank you very much. I will wait a little bit because when you open the portal and so on to type in your questions, because I'm also happy to answer the question during the talks. So if you have specific question regarding one specific topic or one specific slide, I'm happy to pick it up and to answer these questions. Well, as Katja said, I'm the director of ZPID, the Leibniz Institute for Psychology, since 2017. And the Leibniz Institute for Psychology has been founded almost 50 years ago. And the initial aim was to make European and German psychology more accessible to the international community. And when I joined ZPID, I have reoriented ZPID to a so-called Public Open Science Institute. And public means that we receive only public funding. So we are not a commercial player. The OSF is partly a commercial player, but we are exclusively mission-oriented. And our overall aim is to provide open science tools and open science services for psychology and related areas. So some of the tools I'm going to present are most likely also usable to you if you are from other areas than psychology. And now I'm going to start the presentation. And as I said, we're a public open science institute for psychology, but not exclusively psychology, also for related disciplines. And our services are also used, for instance, from social scientists, from the area of political science, and also from life science. And currently we are in the process of a strategic expansion towards a one-stop research support organization, or we call it also a research infrastructure, providing services for the entire research cycle. And that's kind of a heuristic model we are using to develop our services, which you find on the right side of these slides. So we are segmenting the research process in psychology into 7 different stages. And the first stage is an information search stage. The second stage is a study planning stage. The third stage means that a protocol, a study plan can be developed and submitted to our services. Then we have data collection, as a 4th stage in a prototypical research process, data analysis, archiving, and then the publications are being visible to the outside world, they are being published. And the basic idea over the next few years that we become a one-stop service or institution with open science tools for each and every stage in this idealized cycle. And some of these services are already available. I will show them to you. And other services will be available in the near future. And you will get a brief preview how these services to facilitate open science will look like. So, as I said, we are mission driven. We are not profit oriented. We are non-profit institution. There is also a law in Germany which has established our institution. And our mission is to support the scientific community in psychology and beyond to make research more accessible, transparent, and replicable. That's the basic and core idea. So, as I said, we are the Public Open Science Institute for Psychology and related areas. And what I'm now going to do is I will show you a number of services. Partly they are already available and usable to you. And the first thing I'm going to show you is our search portal, which is called PubPsych. You might be aware about the portal PubMed, which is for the medical science, and PubPsych is for psychology. And using this portal, which is available, you can identify papers, but not only papers. You can also identify study protocols. You can identify data. You can also, in psychology, we have so-called intervention manuals for therapies, and they can all be identified through this portal. This is free of charge, of course. And what we have also included here is when the resources are being shown, that we have a so-called unpaywall functionality. So these sources, which are open access, will be highlighted and you can directly access these sources. The databases we are using for the portal are Syndex, which is a database we are producing in-house. So we are the owners of these database, but also other European databases from France, from Spain, and from other countries. And so the data is being updated on a regular basis. and is up to date with a European focus. So you find primarily psychology, but not only psychology related resources using PubPsych free of charge, without a paywall, without signing up somewhere and so on. And the next thing we are currently working on is to make this search portal more intelligent. So currently you have to type in a specific search string, and then the search string is being matched against the database. And the next thing we are working on is a so-called semantic search engine. And also the name will change from PubPsych to PsyPorter. And this means that the machine is going to interpret what your search goal is, what the aims are of your search. So meaning the likelihood that you will identify relevant resources using this semantic search portal will further increase. So that's the basic idea, but this will take another 2 years to develop this semantic portal. It's not just portal design, it is also we have to re-engineer our database to make them more accessible for this semantic approach. So what are the typical usage scenarios for using this search portal PubPsych? It's for identifying pertinent sources from psychology research with a focus on Europe, namely publications, data, study material, and so on. It can be easily accessible, especially open access papers can be identified instantaneously using this unpaywall functionality we have included. And it's also for us way for teaching projects. It's a low hurdle educational tools for courses. For instance, if you would like to train students in doing research in this kind of databases. And in the future, PsyPorter, our semantic search engine, will be used to explore the entire semantic space of a specific topic you are interested in. And also the portal will help you to identify pertinent resources. So you don't have to dig through these 3,500 hits you might have identified. The portal will help you to narrow down the research to the most relevant papers and study materials you are interested in. The next thing I wanted to show you is something, because we are producing Synnex, the database which is being produced in-house since the 70s. We can also do some text mining on this database. And what we did here, we have developed a tool to identify topics which are prevalent in psychology. So basically, with the text mining techniques, the topics are being identified either on a yearly basis. So it's a simple frequency count of different topics. First, the system identifies clusters of topics, and then within these thematic clusters, it has been determined which topics have a specific prevalence rate. So how often do papers address certain topics? And using this tool, we call this tool, as I said, Psych Topics, you can do so-called hot topic analysis. So over the years, since the 80s, you can analyze which of these topics you might be interested in have an increased prevalence rate. So whether a certain field is going to address these topics. At the same time, using this tool, cold topics can be analyzed. So meaning which topics were popular in the past and somehow disappeared for whatever reason. And you can also do a kind of extrapolation. So what will most likely happen with this specific topics you are interested in? What are the typical usage scenarios with this Psych Topics tool? The first thing we envisage is to find ideas for emerging or to be revitalized topics. This is one usage scenario. The second thing is the tool can be used to historically contextualize your own research. So you can ask the question, what is the historical context? How often have these topics been addressed in the past, back to the 80s? And the next thing is, it can also be used as an instructional material for students to historically contextualize study projects and also dissertations on different levels. The third thing I wanted to show you, and this is also available, so the first three tools are available, is a so-called open test archive. And our open test archives has collections of questionnaire items which have a psychology related focus. And this tool can be accessed through different topics. It has also a yearly order to identify topics, and a very detailed explanation of the different instruments. So currently what you see here, unfortunately, is the German version, but we have also an English-speaking version, and you see a summary of these items. You see also whether there are some properties associated with these tools, or what about the reliability in past studies and so on. What about the pertinent papers which have used these items, and you can also download, because it's an open repository, you can also download these questionnaire items and use them in your own research. And of course, we have also an interface. So if you have developed instruments which are somehow related to our field, we would be happy if you could contribute here. And so they will be made available long-term. That's the basic idea of this open test archive. What is the typical user scenarios? The first thing is to identify and using validated open access questionnaire items for your own research. So you have also information about past applications and also information on the psychometric properties of this instrument. It's an item source for teaching projects. And the spectrum is pretty broad. And as you can see, some of these thematic issues which are being addressed can also be used in other contexts, in political sciences, in the social science, and so on. So we have attitude measures, developmental measures, intelligence tests, interest inventories, clinical tests, achievement, then personality tests, and so on. So it's a very broad spectrum. In the future, we will see also this tool, which had been published a few months ago, to grow. Currently, we have 100 and something instruments there, and in the future, it will substantially grow in terms of the number of items, questionnaire items. Now, we're going to enter the world of under development, which is not visible from outside, but which a number of tools which are in progress. We made good progress in the last few months, and they will be released during the next year. And the first thing I wanted to show you is an analysis platform. We call it PsychNotebook, which allows users to plan studies, for instance, to do calculations such as the optimal number of participants for a study, power analysis, or if you are designing complex experiments, you can also design these experiments, and so on. And the second functionality is following data collection. This tool is also usable to analyze the very same data and then to archive the entire project in our repository, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And we call it PsychNotebook. And PsychNotebook, as I said, is a cloud-based analysis platform hosting 40 different languages such as R, Julia, and many others. They can also be combined. You can also use other tools which you had already used, for instance, in the past, like JupyterLab and RStudio. And here you can do the computations online. You can do the computations in a collaborative fashion. You can also use this tool within the confines of a course. My courses are all in PsychNotebook, and I do the analysis there, and I have exercises there, and students can join not only individually, but also as groups and work on these projects and so on. And upon finalization of an empirical study project, after analyzing the data, the entire content can be archived in our repository. So again, what can be done with PsychNotebook, which will see the light of day beginning of 21, is a collaborative planning, analyzing, and tool for documenting research projects. It can be used for collaborative teaching projects. It is under use currently at the University of Trier for 1 year. So we're pretty sure that things will work also if you release it broadly. And it comes with a one-click archiving functionality for long-term preservation of what you did within this environment. Pre-registration, as we all know, is a very important step for research projects which are trustworthy, because you publish your hypothesis before data collection and you test these hypotheses. And for pre-reg, we have developed together with Chris Chambers and many others 2.5 years ago, an environment which we call pre-reg in psychology. And next week, there will be also a joint standard which has been developed together with the Open Science Framework, together with the American Psychological Association, with the British Psychological Association, and also the German association, Open Science Association in this field. And what is possible here, you can submit your study protocol for archiving. That's one part of the functionality. So you get a stamp that this was your idea, and you get a date, and this is certified by an institution like ours. But there's a second stream. The second stream is a stream where you can submit your protocol for reviewing by independent external reviewers. And if we get positive feedback about your study, we are going to collect the data independently and free of charge for you. So that's the second stream here. It's much like the GESIS panel, which you might know, but here connected with a protocol service. So you submit a study protocol, you're interested in a survey, or you're interested in a specific experiment. And we have also a lab infrastructure, so we can also conduct studies in our lab, which require the presence of people. And this is, as I said, free of charge. So only the quality of your study is decisive for getting a free data collection. So it is, as I said, the pre-reg service will be available next year, a framework to develop pre-registered study protocols. So it's not just for submitting, it's also for creating these study protocols based on agreed upon templates. And these templates have been developed together with the community. So that's not our own invention. It's an agreed upon template based on a so-called task force together with the community. Then it provides you kind of a notarized proof of authorship in the earliest possible stage of idea development. And it can also be an educational tool to train students in study planning. Okay, and pre-reg, and it's an entry ticket, as I said, for free data collection in our lab, which will be the next issue. Our lab consists of two streams. It consists of an online stream, an online panel, and it also consists of a presence lab. So that's an image of how you can participate in our studies. And currently, this is based on non-probability samples. So we are buying samples from providers, and then we are conducting the study. And the second stream is a lab, which is located here in Trier, where studies, primarily eye tracking studies, can be conducted. And eye tracking studies with different degrees of precision. So you might know when you do eye tracking, you have high precision devices like the ones which are shown on the upper right of this slide. So a very precise study for a specific person. Up to mobile eye trackers. So in the middle, you can see the mobile eye trackers. And this year, the lab was in a pre-testing phase. We have hosted about 25 different studies. It works. And by the beginning of 21, we're going to release this lab also to the public so that everyone can submit a study. And based on the reviews, we are going to collect them on positive reviews. So it's a low hurdle data collection facility, much like other infrastructures such as the GESIS panel. But one of the advantages in comparison to the GESIS panel is in the GESIS panel, you have 5 minutes of interviewing time. So you have a high quality probability-based sample, but you're restricted to 5 minutes. And the second restriction you have in other infrastructures is you can only implement pretty simple experiments, only 2x2 experiments. In our case, we can have any combination, and we can have much larger samples. If you accept a non-probability sample, then this could be the way to go. And it's a low hurdle data collection because, as we all know, the current model is you have to submit a proposal to some funders, there will be a proposal decision, then you have an own data collection and a paper preparation. And our model is different. You develop a study protocol, you have a protocol decision, and then you will have an independent data collection for free, which increases the trustworthiness of your findings because you didn't touch anything, you just had the idea, someone else is collecting the data, and these data we are collecting, they will be publicly available. So everyone can check whether what you find out or what you predicted was actually has some empirical backing. We have large scale non-probability panel resources, and if you would like to do some eye tracking studies, also top-notch technology to do that. And again, it is free of charge. It is based on public funding. Everyone is eligible, or everyone, meaning we didn't want to introduce some policing thing, only German or only European researchers and so on, because we all know that this can be undermined pretty easily. You just put someone else on the protocol who is from that region, and then it doesn't make sense to police. So we have the decision, and that is also supported by our funders, that everyone can submit, because when you are conducting a study and it's available in our repository, also people from the local area can do research based on the data you have collected, or the data we have collected under your protocol. So it's free of charge, and only the quality is decisive for acceptance or refusal. And what we also promise is a long-term preservation of so-called digital research objects. So a digital research object is, for instance, data or a code book or everything else which is connected to your research project. And now we are leaving the area of projects in preparation, and we are entering the area of things which are available already. Last year, we have published our repository. We call it PsycArchive, which is a disciplinary repository for psychological science and related areas. And we can host up to 23 different digital research objects. And the idea is to have an environment for long-term preservation. So this is not a project management environment such as the Open Science Framework. This is something when you have elements, when you have data and other digital research objects you would like to freeze forever, then this is the right way to go. And you can also update, of course, and then we will mark the different versions. So if you have one version of the data and you do some computations on the data, you have an updated data set, then you can upload it as an update, but the older version is not going to be lost. So you cannot change the older version, they will be updated. And PsycArchives has been chosen by the World Health Organization Europe as a central repository for COVID-19 related research. So here you will find also a protocol about topics which are interested to the general publics, and a protocol. And this protocol has been implemented in various countries, not only Germany, also, for instance, in Italy, in Saudi Arabia, in Israel, and so on. And all these data are centralized here in our place. But we're not only COVID-19 doing this type or hosting this type of research. So all kind of research which has been submitted to our portal is being archived. And another thing we have also prepared, which is currently under revision, is a tool to document your data. So if you have a data set and you would like to document it, you would like to create a code book and so on, then you can upload it to our tool, which is called DataViz. And with DataViz, you simply describe the data. You append an abstract, explanation of the items and things like that. And then you can be pretty sure that your data are ready for reusability. And that's one of the huge disadvantages of other services, not only the OSF, that you have huge resources, but they are not documented according to professional standards. And data which is not being documented is almost lost, as you know. So our point is, it's not enough just to provide a Dropbox for research and some project management playground. It's also important to guide users in how, on a professional level, data should be documented. And this is also being checked in our case. So every time someone uploads data in our place, we have people who are checking the data, whether they are reusable. And that's the difference and the unique selling proposition of our services in comparison to many other services where you're just uploading things and no one is checking the quality of the data, not in terms of the substantive issues, but in terms of whether someone else can reuse the data and make sense of the data. So what are the usage scenarios? With DataWiz, it's possible to generate a data management plan for a prospective study. This is also currently possible, that you can generate data management plan for a prospective study. It's a tool for documenting already collected data. And PsycArchives allows a free long-term preservation of own digital research objects, such as supplements. We also have videos, educational material, and so on, which is DOI identifiable, which is in our place in Germany, which is GDPR compliant. And in the future, we're going to implement so-called fine-grained access levels. So currently, everything you find on PsycArchives is public use. So everyone can download data, materials, and so on. And in the future, in the next few months, we are going to include different access levels. So public use, then scientific use. We are checking whether someone is a scientist, and if he or she is a scientist, only these people can then download the data. The third level is, we call it scientific plus, meaning someone being a scientist has to ask you as a data provider whether he or she can get the data. There are some reasons for preventing the data to be published widely, and then you negotiate, and if you are willing to share the data, then there will be an individual kind of release of the data. And the highest level is, we call it secure files, or the secure level, where you can, in principle, identify people being part of a study, and then you have to travel to a data usage center. And we know this for a number of social science, large-scale studies, that they're not going to release the data as a public or scientific use, but you have to travel to some place. So if you would like to use the socioeconomic panel data in Germany, you have to travel to various places in Germany, and then you can use the data. And we have received funding to create a German-wide network of data usage centers, also together with GESIS, with other Leibniz institutes, to access this kind of data. So that's the next development step of PsycArchives. And another development step will be that we are going to offer PsycArchives free of charge as a white label solution. White label means, in the background is our technology, but it runs on our side, but it looks like being your repository, your institutional repository. So you don't need the technology, you don't need server space and things like that. So, and you have this access point from your side. It looks like the University of Ljubljana, for instance, or the University of Maribor, and so on. And it is searchable also in your area, but it is also accessible through PsycArchives. So that's the second thing we are currently working on, and this will be released 22. So what we do, and also the notebook is one of the examples which we're gonna offer as a white label solution. Good. Let's go to the last stage of this idealized research cycle, and we also act as a publisher. Currently, we are hosting 9 journals which are published under the Platinum model of open access. So as you might know, Platinum open access means no one has to pay except the taxpayers in Germany. Yeah. So it's the authors do not have to pay, the publisher or the association hosting the journal that doesn't have to pay, and the readers also do not have to pay. And we have secured funding to extend these 9 journals to 20 journals. So in the next few years, we will grow and extend the journals. And you see some journals like the European Journal of Research Methods for the Behavioral and Social Sciences. They used to be with Hochrefe, which is a commercial publisher, and they moved to our place. And the journals you are seeing here are the journals which have joined this year. So from personality psychology, another methods journal, quantitative and computational methods in the behavioral science, and so on. And what do we offer here besides the free and open low hurdle access to papers? We have impact metrics here. And in the future, when our Psych notebook will be available, we will connect the notebook with the system, allowing the readers to reanalyze the data live. Yeah? So you don't have to download anything, you just read the paper, and in a separate window, there will be a Psych notebook version, and you can rerun the analysis, and you can also change the code if it's an R code to change the R code. And then you can rerun the analysis under your specific research question. So that's the next step. And as you see, it's not just individual products which are disconnected. In the future, when the entire life cycle is available, we will integrate these different offers. And this is one of the examples. We will integrate the publication platform with the analysis platform. Or we have integrated the pre-reg service with the lab, and so on. And this is what we will see in the future, an integration of different services. But at the same time, it's important to tell you that you're not required to use everything. You know, if you're only interested in publishing a journal or reading the papers, that's fine for us. If you're only interested in publishing data through the repository, that's also fine. Yeah? But the integration is something which also increases the value of these individual products and services we're offering. Okay, what are the typical usage scenario of Psych Open Gold, our open access platform for readers, free articles in rising star journals, with extended functionalities such as impact metrics, related literature, and integration with the archive and with our notebook. For readers, it's an open access publication opportunity in highly visible journals, no APCs. And for professional association, it is a free journal publishing opportunity within high quality publishing services offered by ZPID. So we have a unit for that, and these people produce journal papers. And that's what commercial publishers also do. Yeah, so that's our service. And the final thing I wanted to show you, and Katja has mentioned that I did a number of meta-analysis. We also did high impact meta-analysis together. One of the most cited Slovenian social science papers, right, Katja? And and the idea was when you read a meta-analysis tends to be, which is published static. Yeah? So for instance, in our meta-analysis, which was published a couple of years ago, we had 46 studies included. But as you know, then there's a publication process, there are more recent studies, they could not have been considered, and so on. So sometimes meta-analyses are being published, and there's more research which could have been included. So the findings may be outdated. And our idea was to make meta-analysis more timely, and also to allow researchers to contribute to past meta-analysis by including more recent studies. And under development is currently our so-called community augmented meta-analysis system, where meta-analytic data sets based on our own journals, but also based on other journals, or someone who would like to publish his or her project, will be published, and they can be updated. And this will also be moderated. So there will be people which will check whether the update is appropriate, whether the paper has been accurately being recorded in that system. And what you can then do is to do the typical computations based on these data sets. So meta-analytic means, test for heterogeneity, moderator analysis, and things like that. The system, using the system based on the most recent data set, is also producing the typical graphics. So the forest plots, the funnel plots, the cumulative forest plots, and so on. And as I said, the idea is to have the most contemporary knowledge which has been published in the system to do analysis and to find out what is the effect of something, of an intervention, based on all the papers which are currently available. So what are the usage scenarios? It allows a continuously updated evidence on hotspot topics in psychology. So that's one plan, that we start with hotspot topics. Then it's a planning and implementation tool for your own meta-analysis. So we recommend, when the system is going to be available, that you start with a karma system. So not running the analysis and then importing the data set, but also to use the system during the coding phase, during extracting information and so on. And then you can check live the findings. It's a tool to let the community update your meta-analysis, because colleagues are interested to be included in the meta-analysis. This makes the research visible, of course, and also impactful. There will be a route to update your own meta-analysis, and it's also, we think, a valuable source for teaching evidence-based research issues and research methods courses. Good. At ZPID, we have also research, but research is oriented towards our infrastructure mission. Yeah, we are an infrastructure institution, and the research is related to what we're doing in the service area. And we have 3 research departments. One is research literacy and user-friendly research support. The other one is research synthesis methods, and the third is big data and psychology. And each of these research departments will be headed by an assistant professor. And these assistant professors can grow in our institution up to a full professor lab. So that's the incentive. And we are start to announce also these job opportunities by the end of 21. Okay, the first area, typical topics they're addressing is how do people deal with contradictory evidence? We are producing evidence, so we would like to know how they are processing that information and what we can do to optimize the kind of reception of evidence. Evidence-based thinking and epistemic change, and then also we do some research on open science literacy issues. Research synthesis methods, we have a whole bunch of studies on data collection issues related to survey methods issues. We are also shedding some light on different quality appraisal systems, because one danger of a meta-analysis is if you have garbage primary studies, then the output will be garbage. So the typical garbage in, garbage out problem. And in our field, there is a need for so-called quality appraisal systems where you can check the level of the quality you are including in a meta-analysis. And then we're pursuing another stream, meta-analytic structural equation modeling, which is a very recent development. And we think it's a very promising approach to do meta-analysis. Then we have in the big data department, hotspot topics in psychology. So text mining issues are being addressed there. And one of the tools they have produced has been shown at the very beginning. So based on our databases we are producing, we are identifying hotspot topics and can do analysis about trends in research. Then we investigate theory-driven usage of big data. So not just using big data inductively to identify some patterns, but also how can theories in our fields be improved, making use of big data as a source of information. And then we're addressing some data processing and curation issues. So if you have large amounts of data, if you have censored data, streaming data, and so on, it would not be feasible to store the raw data because this is getting extremely big. So the question is, how can we compute parameters based on these streams? What kind of parameters should be archived then for later use? What are the approaches to compute these parameters and so on? Okay, in the past we had a number of events. Unfortunately, during the pandemics, we had to cancel a couple of them, but we had a series which will hopefully be continued next year on research synthesis issues. So research synthesis methods, 2018 and 2019. On the slides, you can see Daniel Lakens, who's well known in the open science community, who was our guest here in Trier. On one of these slides, you can also see Larry Hedges. Hedges G is a very prominent effect size measure. You can also see Wolfgang Viechbauer, who has invented the metaphor package for doing meta-analysis. Then we had workshops on the determinants of replicability of studies with Isaac Eisen. He has invented the theory of planned behavior. So we're inviting people who have created a theory which has stood the test of time. So which is available for many decades, has been picked up and so on. And we asked the question, what are the properties, what are the features of these studies allowing them to survive the test of time? Then we had a big data conference series. Here on the slides, you can see Mike Cheung from Singapore. And also an open science conference last year with Simine Vazir, for instance, Tom Hardwick, and many other people who are well known to you if you're interested in open science issues. And as I said, we're going to continue the series. In 21, there will be a research synthesis and big data conference in Frankfurt in Germany. And currently we are planning a hybrid event. And in case of the pandemics still being out there, we're going to switch to an online event. And then our research can be found in many special issues, papers. What you see here is just a small collection of a series. We call it Hotspots in Psychology 2018, 19, and 20. So meta-analysis on hotspot topics in psychology. We had a special issue on open science in psychology and big data in psychology and so on. And the keynote talks had been recorded, and they are accessible through our media center. And I can recommend you to look at some of them. And it's very interesting to see Larry Hedges talk about the replication crisis and about his take. Then about power in meta-analysis, for instance, or Wolfgang Viechbauer talking about developing the R package for meta-analysis. And in a few weeks, we're going to switch. These are currently YouTube videos. We will switch to a professional video portal, which has some additional functionalities. And everything we do is free of charge. Use it for your own purposes, use it within courses and so on. We are, of course, happy to share this with you. Okay, this was my brief talk. I wanted to make it really short to allow you to pose questions. And yeah, if you would like to learn more about our place, please subscribe to our newsletter and or to our Twitter stream. So, and now I'm happy to answer the questions.
Thank you very much for this very insightful talk. And yeah, we actually got quite a few questions. Mm-hmm. So maybe if we first start with it's actually two quite similar questions. It goes like, what is the difference between reproducibility, replicability, and repeatability? And then a follow-up question was, what does reproducibility mean for qualitative social science research? But let's just start with the terms, reproducibility, replicability, and repeatability.
Okay, it's really hard to pronounce. So the first, reproducibility is based on whether you can reproduce the analysis based on data you have available, whether you can reproduce what others found. And that's kind of the lowest. It's simply, you use the data, you analyze the data as described, and do you get the same results within some meaningful borders. You know, when you use different packages, SPSS produces sometimes something different compared to R, but the effects are almost identical. Replicability is whether you can replicate the findings. And now there's a debate about that. What does it mean to replicate the findings? And my take on that, and it's the same take also Larry Hedges has, is you replicate something within the border of an acceptable heterogeneity. So when you conduct a study, you know you have different sources of errors. You have sampling errors, you have systematic errors, and so on. And you replicate findings within a meaningful boundary, which is at least defined by sampling error. And in the meta-analysis, you have different levels and sources of sampling errors. Sometimes you have this fixed effect model and the random effects model. So my take on that would be, and other colleagues have different opinions, but my take on that is you replicate a finding, or when you get a result which is within the confines of what can be expected from chance. No? Now, there are different approaches to make something replicable. The exact replicability and the conceptual replicability. And my take on that is conceptual means you're doing something similar, not identical to what has been done or been described, and you test whether you get the same thing. And for me, only exact replications make sense and qualify as replications. If you would like to learn more about the term, then there is an interesting paper by Rolf Zwaan, is his name, from the Netherlands. Zwaan, Z-V-A-A-N, and here he also describes the term. And Chris Chambers, The 7 Deadly Sins of Psychology, is also a very interesting book. He also worked with us on developing the Prereg portal. Yeah. Repeatability. I'm not using that term, but it's only a guess for me that you think that you can, yeah, you can repeat the study on a procedural level, but that's a speculation. So I think that repeatability might just be, is it possible based on a description to repeat something regardless of the outcome? Has it been described? Is the documentation quality high enough to repeat something regardless of the outcome? Yeah? Good. The next question is, could you please say something about reproducibility in light of access to data? Yeah, I can tell you a lot about this, because in the ideal world, you reproduce also the different versions of data you have. So for instance, a very simple example, you're conducting a survey. And when you conduct a survey, you have raw data. No? You have raw data, and raw data is very messy, and you have to edit the raw data, you have to do computations and so on. And then you have different versions of this data. And for me to reproduce something in light of accessing data is not only to have the final data, but to have all versions and all conversions between these different levels of data. And that's for me the highest level of reproducing what happened. So not only on the level of the analysis stage, when you have nicely edited data and you reproduce what came out, but also how these data have been created, or created is not the right term, how these data have been processed to get to a point where you can do some analysis. I'm not sure whether this answers your question. Yeah. Or in large-scale survey projects, you have different versions. You have the raw version, you have a secure use version that to de-identify people, you are changing the variables and so on, and full reproduction is only possible if you have all these data versions available, and also the process how these versions have been created.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like maybe a programming process like on GitHub, where you can see all the,
yes,
all the steps.
yes, it's like on GitHub. Yeah. So in the ideal world, you're not starting with a product with the data. You are starting with the raw data, and then you try to find out whether something happened there, and you might be surprised what can happen during editing data.
I know you mentioned that everything is for free, what you offer on this platform. And here was a question: if all the resources are free, how do you cover operating cost of the infrastructure? I think you mentioned public funding, but could you expand a little bit maybe?
Yeah, so the model in Leibniz institutes is that they are funded by the government or a specific ministry, plus the regional science ministry. Well, in Germany, research and teaching are country specific, so local country specific. And in the Leibniz institutes, you have these two sources. You have from the local government and from the central government the funding. And the funding is secured for 7 years and will be extended if you reach specific goals. And I can tell you, after 3 years, we have reached almost all the goals which we have promised for 7 years. And also we exist for almost 50 years. So I think it's very promising. Well, I cannot promise, but we're on a good way to be there for a long time. Yeah, so it's government funding, it's taxpayers funding. And with now slightly more than 50 people without student assistance. So student assistance on top, that's more than 100, but and we will further grow. And also the operating costs are covered. So we of course have computer scientists telling us, okay, we need resources for storage, we need resources for computations, we need, and this is covered, yeah.
Then the next question, you talked a lot about the quality of a study, like when the protocol is put up that you evaluate it, and how much time, I guess, yeah, how much time does it typically take to check the quality of a study? And maybe also, how do you check that? What's the process of checking the quality?
Yeah, so it is much like being a journal editor. You hope to have completed the review within 4 weeks, but typically it takes 4 to 6 weeks. And we have criteria, and we will also publish the criteria. So you will also know what the criteria are. So typical criteria for empirical studies are whether this is a timely issue, whether the past studies have been included, whether the design is appropriate, and so on. So on all levels of a typical proposal, we are asking the question whether the reviewers regard it as a high quality study. But the important message is the criteria will be published. So everyone who's submitting a protocol can check back and check against these criteria.
Will this also be, will you maybe give some examples of this evaluation as well, of a protocol that has already been submitted? Like in a sense of, I'm talking about maybe, I mean, I have in my mind open peer review.
Yeah.
Were you thinking about that, or for now it's all closed?
Currently, we don't have an open peer review system, but through our archive, you can check past protocols. So all the protocols are being published, and then you can check what has been approved in the past. And again, we're not, employing criteria which are not transparent and public, so they will be transparent. It's almost the same procedure as in the GESIS panel, where we have also at that time published the criteria, and you can check for the criteria. And there will be also justification in case of a rejection. And it's not only kind of a dichotomy, accept or reject, there's also a conditional accept. So there's a possibility to revise, much like in a journal. What advice would you give people to develop this kind of infrastructure that you have in psychology? Well, the advice is, the first thing is you need to understand how prototypical research is being done in this specific field. For instance, the research cycle model we have, that's not only our invention. This is also, you can see it at GESIS. GESIS has a similar thing, but they have different stages. Yeah? So that's one thing. You have to understand the typical work process. You have to do some assessment of the demands. This is also what we did. We asked explicit questions to members of our professional associations. What kind of support do you need? What kind of tools do you need? And so on. And this would be one of the advices. And the other thing is, so that's one source, asking people and understanding also what is missing in a specific field. For instance, in our field, there was what was missing was surprisingly a public infrastructure to collect data free of charge. And this might sound awkward to people from social science, from the social sciences, because we know we have these omnibus studies and we have the panels and so on, but this was almost unavailable, with a few exceptions, to psychology. So to identify the needs and the demands and then to develop them. And a third advice would be not to invent the wheel from anew for everything. That's also not done on our side. So for instance, we have now this white label, or we will develop the white label option for a repository. Well, if someone is out there offering a white label solution, offering software, don't develop it from scratch. Or we have also an adjusted version of a journal platform, which we're using. It's OJS, Open Journal Systems, which is adjusted for our purposes. So these tools, these nuts and bolts, they are available out there. So strong collaboration with others does also make sense. Or for instance, in case of the notebook, we are collaborating with GESIS, because this was an idea when I was at GESIS, and I've took it with me also to ZPID, and they also decided to have it there. So merge resources with other fields. Yeah.
We have one last question, and it's the one I actually also had when I was listening to your talk. And does publishing data in this infrastructure described count something in the research assessment process at your university or other universities in Germany?
That's an excellent question. The answer is increasingly yes. When you try to get a job at a university, and especially at the level of professorships, you are required to explain to what degree you are practicing open science. And those people who are hiding their data, and this is a very strong movement in psychology, who have published a lot and do not publish the data, they currently have, and in the future it will be increasingly difficult to pursue an academic career if you're not complying to open science standards. Yeah, so the answer is yes, publishing data. It's not only ZPID infrastructure. So no one says, and we're not the only one, as you know, there are other repositories, and I also strongly believe that there should be a requirement of many players and so on. Yeah, so complying to open science standards plays some role. And what is also important to say that we are an independent institution. So I'm personally affiliated, and also we are here located at the university, but we have an independent status. So an independent Leibniz institutes are connected via cooperation agreements to universities, but they are legally independent. Yeah. And the reason is simply that a university cannot control a Leibniz Institute. That's the only reason. They are independent. Yeah.
Okay.
So again, it makes a lot of sense, and I'm really happy that many younger colleagues also are so interested in open science issues, because that's really the way to go. And in the past, I recall also the textbooks in statistics, research methods, when I studied psychology, and there were also some open science requirements. For instance, log your hypothesis before you do the research. Yeah, that's pre-reg. Yeah, that's protocol publications. But the usual practice was different. But now we have the tools to do that. Yeah? And that's the important new step with the movement towards internet-based services and so on. We have the possibility now to change our work habit and to make research more transparent, more trustworthy, yeah, and less biased.
Yes. Thank you for your talk and also this very fruitful discussion. I think we finished with all the questions. I'm just gonna check if
there was one question on qualitative social science research. What does reproducibility mean for qualitative social science research? And I have no idea. I have no idea, because I didn't work in this area personally and so on. I know that there are colleagues who are knowledgeable about that, but from my side, I have to confess, I have really no idea, because I'm really a quantitative guy, and yeah, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I think we are done. I'm just gonna check whether there has been any questions, in YouTube chat, but I don't see any. So thank you very much for taking your time to be at this event today. And yeah, I think that's it. We'll finish now. And everyone who is listening to us, you are invited to join us tomorrow and on Thursday, also on our event. So if you just follow us on Facebook, Young Academy, or find more information. Yeah,
okay,
so
thank you.
Hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
May I just add something a little bit at the end? I'm really happy to hear what came out of the enormous work and effort that you put into this project. I'm following you since 2017 when you started, and I also maybe for the public, one of our researchers already collaborated with the Institute. You collected some data for one of our projects, so really something that's useful to start to use. So really thank you for this. And I also have some announcements for the public. I will tell just in Slovene. Tudi v imenu Statističnega društva bi se zahvalila vsem, ki ste sodelovali. Zdaj od Statističnem društvu veste, da lahko več informacij najdete na spletni strani stat-d.si. Thank you for this. And I also have some announcements for the In mlada sekcija pa ureja mesečni novičnik, preko katerega boste potem tudi obveščeni o prihodnjih dogodkih društva in sekcije, tako da vabljeni. Okay, I think we are done. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
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 A vi dve veste, kako ustaviti streaming?
Ja, jaz lahko samo končam, tako mi je bilo rečeno. Končam.
Dobro. Okay.
Ja? Okay.
Hvala obema.
Hvala.
Hvala.